This video is sponsored by DevMountain. If you're interested in learning web development, iOS, or UX design, DevMountain is a 12-week design and development bootcamp intended to get you a full-time position in the industry. To learn more, visit devmountain.com or click the link in the description below. Hey, what's going on, guys? So in this video or this little series, we're going to be building a social network UI or website theme, and this is based off the Dev Connector application, which is the app that we build in my MERN course on Udemy, and I'll put a link to that in the description. But basically, we build out the whole application, but we don't do the HTML, CSS stuff in the course, so I figured I'd make a free series on YouTube where we can build this using HTML, CSS, and Sass. Okay, we'll be using the Sass CSS preprocessor, so we can use nesting and variables, mixins, all that good stuff. Okay, and we'll also be working with CSS Grid, Flexbox. We're going to create a bunch of utility classes for things like buttons and badges and all that stuff. So basically, almost like our own little framework like Bootstrap. Okay, so let's just take a look real quick. This is the landing page, just a background with an overlay, and we have some call to actions. And if we click sign up, it takes us to the form here, so pretty simple. And the login form, I have an example of one of the alerts, so we'll have some alert classes, utility classes. So developers will just show us the list of developers here. I just have 2 John Does, but obviously you can change it to whatever you want. And then if we click view profile, it takes us to the full profile with this top section, bio, skill set, experiences, education, and then at the bottom the GitHub repos. Okay, so we'll create classes for things like these badges and stuff. And we're also using Font Awesome for the fonts. So if we go back to the landing page and I click on the logo here, it takes us to the dashboard, which is basically the logged in area. And you can see that the navbar has changed up a little bit. So here we have experience, education credentials, delete buttons. We have our edit profile button, which takes us to a form to create or edit a profile. Obviously this stuff isn't functional, this is just the theme, but we'll create that. Then we have the add experience and the add education form, which are pretty identical, so we'll do some copying and pasting just to move things along, but we'll create that. And then if we go to posts, we have this text area here and the posts with some like and unlike buttons, comments. If we go to comments, it'll take us to the single post page. So we have like eight or 9 pages to do here, so it will take a couple different videos, but like I said, it's going to sharpen your CSS skills, your Sass. It's also responsive. You'll see if I take this down to about here, the navbar changes, the font size, all that, and you can see that everything still looks pretty good. So this is all stacked. This is CSS Grid. We're actually using grid template areas for the profile. If we go to the dashboard, you can see that now these buttons spread all the way across. So we just have icons for the logout button or logout link in the posts, or I'm sorry, the dashboard, and then the posts. So everything is really responsive, and we're going to be using CSS media queries. All right, so that's it, guys. Let's go ahead and jump in and let's get started. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our theme. Now, the way that you compile Sass is up to you. I'll be using the extension here. Let me just open my extensions. Live Sass compiler, which is right here. So to me, this is the easiest way to do things. It's built right into the text editor, but you could use whatever you want. If you want to use Node Sass, I have a bunch of videos showing you how to create Node Sass. If I remember, I'll put a link in the description, just in case you don't use VS Code, but this is the easiest way, so that's what I'll be using. Now, if you install the Live Sass compiler, you just want to go to your settings, and if we search for Sass and go down to Live Sass compiler, and we say right here, edit in settings JSON, I have a couple special settings just to show you guys, which are these. So basically this settings.formats, I have format compressed, so it's going to compile it into a minified CSS file, and it's going to have the .min.css extension, and it's going to save it to a folder called dist/css. I also have generate maps set to false so that it doesn't create any source maps. So if you want to follow along exactly and have the exact same environment, then go ahead and add those to your settings.json. Okay, so let's go ahead and start to create our structure here. So I'm going to create a folder called dist Okay, that's where basically our public website is going to go, our UI. And then we're also going to have a folder called SCSS for our Sass files. All right, now I'm going to create our main Sass file in here. So let's create a file called style.scss. Okay, make sure you use SCSS. And just to test things out, I'm going to go ahead and put a variable in here. I'll call it primary color. And we'll set it to red. And let's say body. And we'll set the background to that primary color. All right, so I'll save that. Now, inside dist, I'm going to create a file called index.html. So this is basically the landing page. We're going to have a bunch of HTML pages, but we're going to start here. And I'm going to put in my boilerplate with Emmet, so just exclamation, enter, or tab. And I'm just going to change the title here. I'll say, welcome to the dev connector. And I'm going to put a link here to a style sheet, which is going to be in css/style.css. So basically, this is going to be the file that gets compiled from Sass. And for now, I'll just put an h1 in here, and I'll just say whatever, hello. Okay, so I'm going to save that. Now, to get this compiled, we have to run our Sass compiler. And once you install Live Sass Compiler, you'll see this button down here that says Watch Sass. So I'm going to click that, and immediately it's going to look at my Sass, and it's going to compile it into this CSS folder. Okay, it created it for me. And you'll see style.min.css, which just creates this. All right, and we don't want to touch this file at all. This is the compiled CSS. We want to strictly work within our Sass or our SCSS directory. Okay, so now if I go to my HTML file, I'm going to use the live server extension to open it and run it. And let's see, what did I do wrong here? Oh, I forgot the min. So it should be style.min.css. All right, so if we go back, now we get the red background, which is horrendous, so we're going to get rid of that. Okay, so now we have our environment set up. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just start to create some of the HTML. I want to have the navbar. We'll style that, and we'll kind of just go from top to bottom. All right, now we do need Font Awesome, so I'm going to grab that before I forget. So we're going to go to fontawesome.com and start using free, and then we're just going to grab that link and copy it, and then we'll go back and put that right above our style CSS. All right, so our head area should be all set. Now we'll go down into the body, and we're going to start the navbar. So we'll get rid of this h1, and let's do a nav tag here. We're going to have a class of navbar, and I'm going to have background classes. Like I said, I'm going to have a lot of utility classes that it's pretty much like a mini framework. We'll have BG dark, BG primary, and I do borrow a lot of my class names from Bootstrap, so they'll look very familiar. But of course, we're not using Bootstrap. So let's do BG-dark here. And that way you can easily change the color of your navbar if you want, you know, stuff like that. So let's put an H1 in here, and I'm going to have a link to the dashboard. So let's do to dashboard.html. And inside here, I want to have the code icon. So I'm going to use Font Awesome. We want a class of FAS and FA-code. And of course, I'm using Emmet here. And next to that, we're going to say dev connector. Okay, and then under the H1, let's put a UL. And we're going to have some list items with some links. So this one's going to go to profiles.html, and we'll say developers here. And let's copy this down a couple times. Under that, we're going to have our register, which is going to go to register HTML, and then we'll have our login. Okay, and that's it. That's our navbar. So I'm going to save that. Now you'll see things format like it just did because I have the Prettier extension installed. Which is right here, and I have it set to format on save. So that's why it kind of formats and changes a little bit when I save. So let's check it out in the browser. So it looks horrible right now, but we'll fix that. So I'm going to just go to my style sheet now, my Sass, I should say, and start to style the nav bar. All right, now I'm going to add some, before I do the nav bar, actually, I'm going to add some default styling. So I want some variables, and what I like to do in Sass is have a separate file for things like variables, mixins, functions, and I usually call it config or underscore config. So in our SCSS, let's create a file called underscore config.scss. And in here, I'm going to put all my variables, which I'm actually going to just paste in. Okay, so the primary color is going to be that light blue. We have a dark color, which is a very dark blue, almost gray. Light color is a very light gray. We have danger and success, which are red and green, and then I have a max width as a variable, and this is going to be the container's max width. Okay, so let's save that. Let's jump into style.scss, and we need to bring this in. Now this is a partial, this underscore config, so it won't get compiled into CSS. It's just to basically include into this file. And the way we do that is with @import, and we just need to import the name of the file, which is config, no underscore, no .scss, just like that. Okay, so if we do that, that'll bring the variables in. I'm just going to add some basic resets and core styles. So let's set box sizing to border box here, and let's set margin and padding to 0 just to kind of reset everything. Okay, and then for the body, I'm actually going to be using a font called Railway, so that's one thing that I need to get. So I'm going to go to fonts.google.com, and let's search up here for Railway, which is right here. So I'll hit the plus sign, and then down here, I'm just going to grab this link right here. You could put it in your style sheet or your HTML. I'm just going to put it right in the HTML. So we're going to put it in our head right under font awesome. Okay, so now we can go back here in our body and we can use font family, and we can now do Railway, and then I'm just going to do sans serif. Okay, now the font size, let's see, font size, we're going to use 1 rem. I'm going to be using rem units a lot. If you're not familiar with rem units, basically 1 rem is equal to whatever the default font size of the HTML or the root tag is. So this right here, which by default is 16 pixels. Okay, but you can manually change it. Like if I were to do HTML font size 10 pixels, then 1 rem would be 10 pixels. But I'll usually leave it at a base 16. All right, we're going to do a line height of 1.6 and a background. We'll do background color of white. Okay, and then the color of the text is going to be almost black. We're going to do a real dark gray. So if we save it, so far it should just look like this. Let's remove the underline from the links, and also I'm going to use the primary color for the links by default. So let's add right here for all of our A tags. We want to do text. Actually, you know what? I'm going to make this, I don't know what's up with my mouse today. I'm going to make this smaller and make this smaller so that we can see what's going on at the same time. So let's do text decoration none, and let's set the color to the primary color. Okay, so if we save that, we get rid of the underline and we get the primary color. So for the ULs, I'm just going to remove the bullets with list style none. And for any images we have, I want them to take up the full width of their container without breaking out. So I'm going to set the default width of images to 100%. Okay, and that should be it for the core styles. Now we're going to move on to the actual navbar. So let's say navbar, and we have a class of navbar, and we're going to be using flexbox here. So usually the way that I decide for flex and the grid I usually use for main layouts, you know, like for instance the profile page, all the boxes. I'll use the grid for that. For things like aligning text inside of a navbar, I'll use flex. I think it's just I think it's just it's easier than using the grid for little things like that. So we said display flex, so I'm gonna go ahead and align items to the center. Okay, and as soon as I say display flex, everything aligns horizontally like that. Now I want the links way over here, so we can do that by adding a justify content of space between, because we want to put all the available space in between the two elements, the two flex items. Okay, and then we're going to set some padding. Let's do 0.7 rem and 2 rem, and we'll save that. All right, so again, this is a multiplier of whatever the HTML element font size is, which is 16. So 2 rem is 32 pixels. 0.7 is whatever 16 times 0.7 is. If a lot of people will put a base 10, so they automatically know that, for instance, 0.7 is 7 pixels, 2 would be 20 pixels, but I don't know, I keep it at 16. Just preference, really. So we want this navbar to be position fixed because I always want it to be at the top. So we want to do a position fixed and also a z-index of 1, so that's always on top of the rest of the content. I'm going to make sure it's a width of 100%, and we want it from the top 0 position. And let's add a border bottom, and I'm going to do solid 1 pixel and primary color. Okay, and the last thing, I want it to be a little translucent, so I'm going to use 0.9 opacity, and we'll save. Now, notice that I haven't added a background. That's because, remember, we have that utility class, that BG dark, and I'm going to take care of that afterwards. First, I want to get these links sorted out. So with Sass, we can nest things. We can nest properties or selectors. So within the navbar here, I'm going to go ahead and put a UL, and I want the UL to be a flex box so that I can align it correctly. So display flex, and now you'll see that they're side by side. Okay, and then for the A tags in the navbar, I'm going to set the color to white. Let's set the padding to 0.45 rem, and let's set the margin to 0 on the top and bottom and 0.25 rem on the left and right. Now if I save it, everything's going to disappear just because of the color is white, so I'll just comment that out for now until we change the background. Now on hover state, I actually want the primary color, because remember, it's good, the links are going to be white, so when it's hovered I want primary. So we can simply do ampersand : hover. So any A tags within the navbar that are hovered, we want to set the color to the primary color. All right, so we'll go ahead and save that. So our navbar looks pretty good. Now let's create the background utility classes. Now what I like to do when I'm building with Sass is have a special file for our utility classes. So in SCSS, I'm going to create a new file called _utilities.scss, and let's just go ahead and bring that into our main file here up at the top. So we want to say utilities. All right, and then inside utilities, we're going to add, let's see, let's do some of our main utilities first. Well, no, we'll do it as we move along. So let's do the backgrounds. So we'll have backgrounds. Now backgrounds are going to be, you know, BG-primary, BG-light, all that stuff. So let's add in here just .bg, and then in these curly braces, I'm going to take the ampersand and then do a dash primary, for instance. And what this means is, if you're not familiar with Sass, this ampersand is a placeholder. It's going to be replaced with just BG. So when we add the class BG-primary in our HTML, this will, whatever is in here, will take effect. Okay, and I'm going to set this to, let's say, background color, and let's use the primary color, and then we're going to want color color white. All right, so what I'd like to do though is, instead of instead of putting a background color and a color for every one of these, I'd like to create a mix-in that we can use that that will set the text and the background. So in our config, let's go to config SCSS, and let's create a mixin. Okay, a mixin is like, it's kind of like a function, except it doesn't return anything. It just outputs whatever you put there. So in our case, background color, text color. So let's say set background and text color. Okay, so we create a mixin by doing @mixin, and then we'll call it set dash background, and it's going to take in a color. And I'll just grab these and put that in here. Okay, now this primary color I'm actually going to replace with whatever color is passed in. Now for the text, this is another great thing about Sass, is we can actually test the lightness of the background and then decide the text color based on that. So I'm going to have an additional function. This is actually going to be a function because it's going to return something, but I'm going to go above it and I'm going to say set text color based on the background. All right, so let's do @function and say set dash text dash color, and that's going to take in a color. Okay, and then we're going to use a conditional here. Okay, in Sass you can have if statements, so we're going to do @if, and there's a function called lightness that will test the lightness of something. So we're going to say if the lightness of the color that's passed in is greater than, let's say, 50, then we want it to be a dark text. So we want to return from this. So @return 333. Okay, else, so basically if it's a light color, actually we need an @ symbol. So if it's a light color, then we want to return, I'm sorry, if it's a dark color, we want it to return a light color, so white. Oops. Okay, and now down here, we can simply take, instead of doing just white for everything, we can use set text color. And we can pass in here the color, which comes in right here. So hopefully this makes sense. We're setting the background with the background color that's passed in, but we're setting the text to either dark or light depending on that background color. Okay, so let's save this, and then if we go back to our utilities, all we have to do here in our utility is include the mixin. So we can simply do @include and set background, and then the color, whatever the background color is in this case, is going to be the primary color. Okay, I just figured we'd get this stuff out of the way so that we can use these classes from now on. So that'll take care of the primary. Now we want to do the rest. So I'm going to just copy this. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 we're going to have. So the next one is going to be light, so BG light, which is going to take in the light color. And then we have dark, which is actually what the navbar uses. That's going to take in the dark color. And we have success. I'm just going to do a Control D here to select the next primary. And we're going to do success. And then this one will be danger. And then this last one is going to be white. Now white, we don't have a white color, so I'm just going to pass in the color white like that. All right, now one thing I want to add here is for the light background and the white, I actually want a border, so I'm just going to add a border to those. So let's say border CCC, which is a light gray, and then 1 pixel solid. So I'm going to have that for the light and for the white color. Whoops, I need to copy that. Okay, so now I'm going to save this, and now you can see our dev connector has the BG dark, and we can use any of these classes now within our theme. So back in index.html, I'm sorry, back in style SCSS, let's uncomment the color white for the navbar. And there we go. Now you might be asking, well, why did you put color white when we're looking at the background color and deciding the text color in our function. Well, it's because they're links. Okay, so if I were to comment that out, they're not going to be white because they're links. However, if I were to remove a link, let's just go to developers here and just take away the A tag and save, you can see that it's now white. And just to give you even more proof that this works, let's go into, where are we? Let's go into our, wait, where are we? Navbar, no, utilities. And it has BG dark right now. Actually, you know what I'll do is just change it in the HTML. So instead of BG dark, let's do BG primary and save. And now you can see it's still white because of the contrast. Let's make it white. Let's do BG white and save, and notice that it's a dark color. Okay, so we don't have to worry about the text colors for backgrounds, unless of course they're links. We could implement that in the CSS, but I'm just going to leave that. We'll just do links on our own. All right, so let's put our A tag back and our BG dark class back. Okay, so the navbar is all set, aside from the responsiveness, which we'll get to later. Let's actually just uncomment this white right here. So now we're going to do the rest of the index page, which is the landing area. So under the navbar, I'm just going to close this up. Under the navbar, we're going to have a section, and I'm going to give this a class of landing. Okay, and then inside here, we're going to have another class of dark overlay, because we're going to have a background image, but we need an overlay, a dark overlay, so that the text is readable, so that you could use basically any image. Otherwise, the text will get lost in the image. You could darken it with graphic design software like Photoshop, but I'd rather do it within the CSS. So let's put another class of landing-inner, and in here let's do an h1. I'm going to have a class called x-large for headings, and let's say developer connector, and under the h1 we're going to have a paragraph with the class of lead, and I'm just going to say create developer profile / portfolio, share posts, and get help from other developers. Okay, and then underneath that I'm going to have a div with the class of buttons, and inside here we'll have our register button. So I'm going to do an A tag here and have it's actually a link, but I'm going to format it as a button with BTN and BTN -primary. And yes, these are very pretty much identical to Bootstrap classes. So let's do register.html. And then, I mean, if you were to switch to Bootstrap, you have most of the classes in place. So in here, let's just say register, and then let's copy this down and let's put a login. Actually, I'm going to say sign up. Say sign up, and then down here we'll just put in our we'll put in our login text. All right, and that should do it. Let's save that. Now notice everything is underneath the navbar. That's because the navbar is fixed. So we're going to fix that within our CSS. So let's head to style.css, and we're going to start to work on our landing classes. So let's put a comment here. We'll say landing, and we're going to have a class of landing. And I'm going to go ahead and position this relative so that we can do some absolute stuff later within it. And here's where we're going to put the background image. Now, I'm going to include in the description a link to all the code, all the HTML, CSS, and the image. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it yet. I'll probably use some kind of platform, but you'll have an image in there, and we're going to put that inside the dist folder, inside a folder called img. All right, so I'm just going to, let me just open this in my Finder and grab the image real quick. Okay, and of course you could use any image you want. I got this image from pexels.com too, if you want to search for it. If you just search for, like, I don't know, laptop or coding or something like that. All right, so let's see. We're going to add the background image here. So let's actually close that up and let's say background URL and dot dot. We're going to go up one level to image and into showcase dot, and it's a JPEG. I think that's the right location, right? Yeah, it should be. Because right now we're in the Sass file, but we're doing this relative from the CSS file. So we want a no repeat. And let's do position center, center. And we want to cover the whole thing here. Show the whole image. And then let's set the height of the landing to 100 viewport heights, which is the entire height of the browser, no matter how big or small it's stretched out. So we'll save that. Now we have our background image. Now, as far as the text, we want this all to be centered. We want to make the text larger, stuff like that. So we have that class of landing inner. So what I'm going to do is within the landing class, I'm going to use ampersand dash inner, because remember the ampersand gets replaced with whatever is here, so it's going to be landing inner. And let's do color, make sure everything is white. And we want to set the height of this to 100%. Because I'm going to be using flexbox to align everything. All right, so let's do display flex. Now, if I do display flex, you can't really see it up here, but it makes everything go in a row side by side, and I don't want that. I want it to go up and down, so I'm going to set flex direction to column, which will make it go vertical instead of horizontal. Now, to center everything, let's set, let's add a width of 80% and margin auto. And then to center everything, we're going to do align items to the center. And when I save that, you can see it's centered up here. I know it's really hard to see right now, but I also want to center it this way vertically. So for that, we can use justify content. Oops. We want justify content center. Now, the reason that didn't work yet is because if we look at the HTML, we have dark overlay in between the two. So dark overlay also has to have a height of 100%. In order to center it this way, it has to be 100% of its container's height. So we'll fix that in a minute. Let's just add a text align center here as well, and then we should be all set with landing inner. Okay, so now let's see. I guess we'll do the dark overlay before we continue on with you know, the font sizes and stuff. Actually, the font sizes are going to be utility classes too. So let's go into utilities. And I'm considering the dark overlay as a utility because we can I mean, we're only using it once, but it's something we could use over and over. So I am going to put that in utilities. So let's go right here and we'll add dark overlay, and watch, as soon as I put in height of 100%, everything should get centered, and there we go. Okay, we also want a width of 100%, and the way that we're going to make this an overlay is by positioning the dark overlay absolute within the landing class, and we want it to start from the top 0 and left 0 and go 100% height and width, which we already put above there. All right, so if I were to add a background color now, like let's say red, and save, it's going to cover the entire thing. Now, obviously, we don't want this. We need it to be translucent. So instead of using a solid color like this, I'm going to use RGBA, which is red, green, blue, alpha, and it allows us to add a transparent color. So RGBA, red, green, blue, I'm going to use 0 for all of that, making it black. And then let's do 0.7 for the transparency. So if I save, now you can see that it's black, but it's also transparent, which gives us an overlay. If you want it lighter, you could do, you know, any number you want here. I think 7's pretty good. Okay, so that gives us our overlay. Now, next thing I'm going to do is this stuff here doesn't look very good. So we have a couple classes. I'm actually going to go to the top here. I like to organize this in a certain way. So let's say text styles. So for instance, we have our extra large heading, which I'm going to make the font size 4 rem, and let's make the line height, we're going to lessen the line height to 1.2, and then let's add a margin bottom of 1 rem. Okay, and then let's see what else we have. A class of large, which is going to be very similar, except it's going to have the font size is going to be 3 rem. All right, and then we have our lead, which is for paragraphs, and that's going to have a font size of 1.5 rem. And let's see, line height, we don't need an extra line height. Margin bottom is going to be 1 rem as well. So let's save that. Good. And I'm just going to make this a little bigger like that. Okay, so next thing, or last thing on this page really, is the buttons. Okay, and the buttons are going to have a utility class as well, or utility classes. So we're going to do something similar to what we did with the backgrounds. So I'll put this, let's see, we'll go right below the backgrounds and say buttons. And this is how I like to build themes and user interfaces. I like to have these utility classes that we can use all over the place, and then we have our main styles for specific components like the navbar, the landing page. But it's all preference really. I think it's better than just putting it into like one big monolithic file. So buttons I'm going to display as an inline block, and I'm going to add a background, a default background of the light color. Okay, we're going to add other classes like BTN primary and stuff to change the color, but by default, if that's left off, I want it to be just the light color. And then the text will make dark gray. And then padding, let's do 0.4 rem, top and bottom, 1.3 left and right. Okay, and then border, I'm going to say none. And we want to make sure the cursor is a pointer, because we're going to use this on links and actual buttons. And let's see what else. Let's make the font size, make sure that's 1 rem. And I'm going to add a margin right just to push, because when we have buttons in a row, I want to push the next one over a little bit. So we'll do half rem here. And let's get rid of any outline, not output. It's funny, I just wrote that automatically. Outline none. So if I save, it's going to look like that. Now, like I said, we want to have different color classes. So I'm going to do ampersand dot btn dash primary, because with our buttons we're going to add the class btn and a subclass like btn primary or btn dark. And I'm going to use the same mixin, the set background, as we did with the backgrounds. So set background, and pass in here, since this is primary, we want the primary color as the background. Okay, so I'll save that. Looks like I used button primary for both buttons, which I didn't want to do. I actually want one of them. The second one I want to be BTN light. Like that. Okay. So back to utilities. Let's see. So that's button primary. Now for the hover, I'm just going to lighten it a little bit, because in Sass we have lighten and darken. So let's do an ampersand colon hover. So this particular button, when it's hovered, we're going to set the background to lighten. And this will take in two things, the color, which is primary color, and then the percentage we want to lighten it, which I'm going to do 5%. So if I save, if I hover over a primary, you see it lightens a little bit. Now I want it to have a smooth effect rather than just change rapidly like that. So I'll just add a transition on it. So we'll say transition. I'll just use all, and then 0.2 seconds, and let's do an ease in effect. So that way, if I hover over it, it has kind of a smoother effect. And you can make this longer if you want. All right, so that's button primary. Now I'm going to copy this button primary, and we're going to actually, wait a minute, did I go? Yeah, right here. All right, so we're going to do, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it, 4. So primary, we're also going to have dark, where we just change this to dark. And let's see, for the hover, we're going to just lighten the dark color, 5%. And then this one will be success. I'm just going to control D twice and then change that to success. And then this one will be danger. All right, now for just the regular hover, because we have all the hovers for the special classes, the color classes, but I'm going to go still within just the BTN and put in a hover. Oops. We want ampersand hover. And I'm going to use background lighten. Now, since this is the light color, I'm going to use, I'm actually going to use the dark color, a lighter dark color, if that makes sense. So let's put in dark color as the background when we hover, but I'm going to lighten it 20%. Okay, I'm also going to change the text color to white. Now, actually, you know what? I put in the index HTML button light, but I'm actually going to not have a button light. Just BTN is the button light. So if I save that and go and save my utility, so if I hover over this, now we get the dark color, but it's 20% lighter. All right, so I think that's fine. If you want to do a button light, you can do that, but I'm just going to leave it so BTN is just the this right here. All right, cool. So, excuse me, I think that we're done with the landing page. So in the next video, we're going to start on some of the inner pages.